Hey everybody, welcome to the stream. It's like, the wife isn't home all day. As soon as I go on standby on the stream, the wife comes home. Women. Sense of timing, perfect. How are you doing? We are, of course, here because we are recording an episode of The Private Citizen tonight, which is going to be on Wednesday for once, as it's supposed to be. And usual ground rules apply. Of course, I'm not interacting with chat as much as I usually do, but if you've been here for podcast recording, you know all about that. And I gotta, once again, kind of get it out of the way quickly, record the show, and then I'll hand you on to another broadcaster, and then I'll edit the show and put it out, and then I'll have to spend 3-4 more hours with NaNoWriMo, because I haven't written a word today, and I can't stream that tonight. I can barely do this podcast. I haven't slept a lot recently. I'm basically working normally and then mostly doing NaNoWriMo at night. But anyway, let's get this all set up here. Let's get this party started. Where's the... Yeah, okay. Oh, no. Yep. I should probably arm tracks. This is starting well, isn't it? All right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 testing. Hello, Astral. How are you doing? This is starting well, isn't it? Yeah, starts with an error. This is a good sign, isn't it? This is what happens if you don't get enough sleep. I can't recommend it. I feel a little bit like in that Battlestar Galactica episode, what's it, 36 hours or whatever, 36 minutes, where they can't sleep because they have to jump all the time. Yeah, one more week of NaNoWriMo. Yeah, not actually one full week, but we'll see. I'll have to. I don't know. I would like to go get ahead and just finish on Sunday, if I can, but we'll see. I'll probably stream a lot of NaNoWriMo on the weekend. Right. I think I'll just do the show. Right. Let's get this going, and let's get this. This episode is weeks, almost months late anyway, so might as well get it out of the way. Let's turn the phone off. Also plug it in because it has no battery left. All right. Let's do this. Let's see if I can remember how this goes. I say that every time, don't I? All right. You're listening to The Private Citizen, episode 97 for Wednesday, the 24th of November, 2021. The app tracking transparency smokescreen. Hello, everybody. My name is Fab. Come to you live from Düsseldorf in Germany. Welcome to the show. Nice to have you. Thanks for listening. This is your podcast about privacy and politics and civil rights and all that stuff that everybody seems to, the politicians, the companies, everybody just wants to take that away from us, which is why I've armed myself with a shotgun. Not literally, just on the album art. And Today we're going to talk about, or tonight, or whatever time it is for you, we're going to talk about Apple's app tracking transparency feature, which I've talked about on the show before, and I wanted to revisit. And I've been meaning to do this for weeks, months, I think. And now we are finally getting to it. Of course, I'm doing this because I wanted to get this out of the way. Of course, today, the so-called Traffic Light Coalition in Germany has signed their coalition contract. So that is kind of now official. And that's another episode I need to do because I kind of promised that once that happens, I was going to go into that. I'm going to do that for the next episode, which should be out next Wednesday. Let me just look into my calendar here. I think that's the plan. Of course, we're coming up to the end of the year. And so maybe before I go into today's topic, I'm going to do a little bit of housekeeping and tell you what the plans are until the end of the year. So yes, next episode should be out on the 1st, which is the next Wednesday. So there, if everything goes according to plan, I'm planning up to episode 102 for this year, which will bring us up to exactly 52 episodes for this year, which will mean I've exactly released one episode a week, which I'd planned to do. But I will record, I will record them in the next few weeks. And then I usually do this. I've been doing this ever since I've been doing podcasts. I'll take off the end of the year, basically from before Christmas till the new year. That's a time where I usually spend time with my friends and my family. And I don't really want to be sitting down recording podcasts in that time. So I always take that time off, but I will I will produce episodes before that and release them so you get your 100, the 100, all those episodes, all those 52 episodes a year, and we'll get up to episode 102. So coming up on like the middle of December, I'll probably start releasing episodes a little bit earlier. There's one kind of special episode scheduled, which is episode 100. I'm going to talk about that a little bit in a second. And then, of course, episode 102, which I'm currently, this is subject to change, but I'm currently planning to release on the 20th of December. So that'll be last podcast for the year, episode 102. So that will be the year-end recap. I did that last year as well. I think that worked really well. And then I'm, taking some time off. And then I'll be back in the new year, probably in the second week of the new year, something like that. Of course, I'll make up that first week episode as well. But yeah, so that's the plan. For the 100th episode, I'm planning to do a little bit of a special episode. So the idea is I want to record another episode. Usually I talk about all kinds of topics and stuff. That episode will be another episode that's primarily about me. And why do I want to do that? I want to give you a little bit more background about me, right? About where my opinions come from. Because I talk about on this show that the goal of this show is to give you information and then have you think for yourself about that information, and that's why, if you go to privatecitizen.press, there's always show notes with lots of information in there so you can form your own opinion. And as I've said before, my belief in journalism as a journalist, my personal belief in journalism is I aim for objectivity, but nobody can be completely objective. So it's important for the reader or the listener to know what your writer or your presenter, or, the journalist in front of you, and what their personal biases are, right? So that you know how to, everybody has their own background and their own biases, so that changes how they think about things. And I think it's fair if you're listening to me for 102 episodes, or in that case for 100 episodes, right, on episode 100, if you listen to me for 99 episodes, I think it's fair for you to know where I come from. And I want to do that a little bit more in that episode. Now, it's gonna be a little bit like the 1 year anniversary episode. That was when was that? Episode 55. But that was an AMA where I had listeners ask questions. This episode 100, I want to structure a little bit more. I want to talk a little bit about myself, coming from myself. But I also want to give you the ability to ask questions. So that's why I'm mentioning this. It would be great if you do not ask questions again that were in episode 55. So those questions are actually listed. So if you go to the show notes, Private Citizen Press, show notes for this episode 92, at the very top, there's a list. There's a link to the 1 year anniversary special. There's a list in there with all the questions. So it'd be nice if you don't ask any of those 22 questions again. But then I put a link on the forum to a topic on episode 100 on the forum, where you can ask me some more questions. Maybe with an eye towards background of me and where I'm coming from and why I do this and stuff like that. And I have some really good questions here from Evgeny and Basil Barry Williams, and those I will already include. But I would like you to, if you want to know something that fits into this kind of thing, please go to the forum and ask me there. You can also, of course, use one of the other contact means that are listed on the webpage, Private Citizen or Press, and contact me that way. So that's what I'm doing. I would love to do another, like I'd in a perfect world, I would do another 100th episode. I would love to do something special. I mean, for Linux Outlaws, for example, think the 100th episode, we explain how we produce the podcast. Maybe I can do that at some point as well, again, because obviously since then things have changed wildly. But, it might be interesting for people who want to do a podcast. I think that 200th episode, me and Dan did on the Autobahn at 200 kilometers an hour. I was driving and we were doing a podcast. That was pretty cool. And then, of course, we did a live show. I think that was episode 300. I would love to do a live show again. But, obviously that's out of the question right now. So this is what I'm going to do for the 100th episode. Maybe we can do something a little bit more special for this episode 200. We'll see when we get to that. That's 2 years distant. So who the fuck knows what will happen until then. Before we get into the topic for today, one more thing. It's like it's Columbo. One more question. I've also started using the forum because it seems I like it and seems to work well with the feedback, as we'll see in today's feedback segment. But I've started doing this. I might want to do this for select episodes. I started it for this episode. I opened the topic on I said, 2 days ago, I said, this is what I want to talk about in the next show. Do you have some feedback or some questions ahead of time? And for this episode, we didn't get any. Well, it's a long story. I got some input, but then it turned out the person asking was actually asking about something else. And didn't really work, but it was only a try this time. But I might be doing that. So if you're on the forum, you might get a chance to just put in some stuff ahead of time. Maybe stuff you want me to talk about, questions you have, points you want me to research or touch on. Sorry, I'm gulping down coffee. Another thing I have to say, if I seem a little bit discombobulated today, I apologize very much. I'm doing NaNoWriMo, which is the National Novel Writing Month, which means you're trying to write 50,000 words in a month. Over 1,600 words a day, and I'm doing that, but that isn't the only words I'm writing, because obviously also writing for paid contracts and stuff like that. So I'm writing those 1,600 words extra on top of everything I do. So a lot of the time doing that at night. So there have been too many nights in the last 2 weeks where I've only slept 4 hours, 5 hours. There was one night where I slept 3 hours. Was extremely painful. I actually slept I went to bed at 3 last night, but I got up at 9, so I did sleep 6 hours. That was quite good. Well, I didn't fall asleep directly, but it was good enough. But it's it's accumulating. Also, we had friends over on the weekend. When I was up long drinking, doing shit. I'm it just all adds up. So this will all normalize in December. So please it should be okay. By next episode will be on the 1st. There'll still probably be some NaNoWriMo hangover, but it should normalize pretty quickly. Just so you know where I'm coming from. Anyway, that was enough housekeeping. That's a hell of a lot of housekeeping. Let's get into the topic we are here to talk about, and which I wanted to talk about ages ago. So it's about time. Let's talk about Apple's bullshit app privacy thingy. So if this is like a deja vu for you, then that means you're paying attention, because I've talked about this before. This was episode 81 in August. I talked generally about Apple, or like I used to call it on Linux Outlaws, Crapple. Full disclosure, I have an iPhone. I have an iPad as well, which I really like, mostly for drawing. But I have issues with Apple, and I touched on that. And back in that episode, I already talked about Apple's app tracking transparency thing, which they introduced in iOS 14.5, which you'll probably know if you use iOS. It started popping up. You install a new app, and the first time you use it, this thing pops up, and it says, do you want to ask this app not to track? And of course, you click yes. But everybody seems to be doing that. So I think there was like a 96% rate where like some of the numbers of people like opting out of tracking. And it was already pretty clear. I think that was in July. And in August, like last time I talked about this, it was already pretty clear that this system wasn't doing anything, because we had Facebook's basically the earnings call, and it turned out that they were foreseeing before this all launched. They were like, the world's gonna end, our ad revenue is gonna fall through the floor, it's gonna be apocalyptic. And basically their revenue was fine. Actually, it increased, even though they were already affected at that point by this ATT, app tracking transparency feature. So already then we kind of knew that this feature was bullshit and wasn't working. And even then, I mean, I'm gonna talk a little bit about this again, about Apple's general, we are so privacy conscious, and what I think is propaganda. But already in August, I kind of postulated that they probably introduced this feature not because they care about privacy, but I don't know. My wife is doing something. Is moving furniture around, it seems, in case you heard that. This is like back in the good old days when we were in a flat without like an open floor plan flat in Bonn for Linux Outlaws, when she had to be like, she was actually, so I was podcasting, we were in the same room, and I was like on my desk and she was on the couch listening to, like, I don't know, watching movies or whatever on like headphones. We have, it's a bit better now. We actually have walls now, but sometimes you can hear things. I could also, I don't know. I was gonna say I could do like sound insulation, but then I really can't, because I don't have a dedicated studio. And if I start plastering sound this room already looks enough like a man cave. Man cave. Maybe that was a Freudian slip. Showing too much about my relationship here. Anyway, where was I? My theory back in August was that they did this because of the EU laws, privacy laws, GDPR, privacy. I want to say privacy. You get back into saying privacy. Speak the Queen's English here. EU privacy laws, and probably also because they wanted to sock their competitors from Google and Facebook. Oh, by the way, one thing I want to say, I'm going to keep calling the company Facebook. I know they renamed to Meta, and everybody in the tech press seems to be very intent on calling them Meta. But as far as I understand, it's kind of like Google renaming to Alphabet, right? They renamed the parent company, which nobody really cares about that. Like the site's still called Facebook, as far as I can tell. And to me, the business is Facebook. if that's gonna change, I might start calling them Meta, but it's a stupid name anyway. So I'm gonna keep calling them Facebook for now, just as a heads up. I know what's going on. I know they're renamed. I know they know all about the metaverse or whatever that means. It's all propaganda. But anyway, so I that was my theory, that they were going to do this to, or that they were doing this to basically because, they wanted to throw a spanner in the works for Google and Facebook, not because they care about you and me and our privacy rights. But what I wanted to talk about now is this. So this basically theory we had back then seems to have been right. And since then, at the end of September, there was an independent study published by a company called Lockdown Privacy. Very aptly named these days. Kind of like Epidemic Sound. It's a good name for the times. Epidemic Sound, Lockdown Privacy. So they're like a privacy company, and they do all kinds. They do like apps and open source stuff. And interestingly, former Apple engineers founded the company. But they did a study, which was relatively small in scope, but proved its point really well, I think. So I'm gonna read from their summary of the study. They're saying in April 2021, also it was April already, okay. In April 2021, Apple released the App Tracking Transparency ATT feature with iOS 14.5. ATT claims to give users choice and transparency for third-party tracking in their apps, and it was lauded by many as a step forward in protecting user privacy. Does it really work? 5 months after its release, we tested 10 of the top apps in the App Store to see if ATT succeeds in stopping tracking. Using the open source Lockdown Privacy app, which is their app. What is she? Why is she's like, now she's banging pot. I'm sorry about this. Is my mic hotter? Usually you can't hear this. Anyway, sorry. Usually I don't hear it, which is why I'm getting distracted. Does it really work? 5 months after its release, we tested 10 of the top apps in the App Store to see if ATT succeeds in stopping tracking. Using the open source Lockdown Privacy app and manual testing, we found that app tracking transparency made no difference in the total number of active third-party trackers and had a minimal impact on the total number of third-party tracking connection attempts. We further confirmed that detailed personal or device data was being sent to trackers in almost all cases. ATT was functionally useless in stopping third-party tracking, even when users explicitly choose ask app not to track, which is the setting. And then, of course, they did this kind of in conjunction with the Washington Post, which I guess got like a publishing, like an exclusive on this. And they go into more details. I'm not, I put this information in the show notes, Private Citizen Press, so you can read it. But I'm just going to summarize. I'm not going to read out all of this, but I'm going to summarize to you what is happening here. So the way, what app tracking transparency is supposed to do is what people do that, sell apps on the App Store is you download their app, and so, you're using the app, and of course they can show you ads and whatever. But what they really want to do is also figure out what other apps you use, right? And you can do certain things in iOS, and the same is true for Android in many cases. You can get like, for example, a manifest of all the apps installed on the device. You can see what other apps the user uses, and you can, of course, so if you, if your app, if you partner with like one of the big ad networks, like DoubleClick or whatever, that from Google, and so you have that app on the user's device, so you know the user. And the way these ad networks work, of course, is they're in all kinds of other apps, but also on a lot of websites. So if they know the user and the user's device, and that user device visits a website where their tracker is also embedded, then they know that, Fab, Fab downloaded our, awesome weather app, and then Fab goes to CNN, and they have a tracker there as well. Then they know, okay, this is Fab. He's got a weather app installed, and he likes to visit CNN or whatever. And they collect. They know what websites you visit, or what other apps you have installed. And from that, they can profile you, figure out things about you, and sell that to other companies who then advertise towards you, either in the app or on the website or whatever. But they want this knowledge, right? And app tracking transparency was supposed to block that. It was supposed to block that, if I install the awesome weather app and I tell it not to track, then it was supposed to not to be able to connect, Fab, who's installed this app, to whatever user is surfing the web and is also visiting our trackers. And it does that in a way. Like there's a technical mechanism that Apple has implemented that technically does that. But what these companies do is they just track you differently, and they can even track you better that way, which I'm going to go into a little bit. But like they can even track you better that way, and they're still tracking you. And I think I'm going to talk about this at the end. But my theory is that Apple knew this because they're not dumb. Apple, you can say a lot about Apple. They often fall prey to hubris. They make, very, egoistic. They make decisions that I would call dumb, but they're not dumb in unintelligent. Sometimes they just think, okay, we want stuff to be this way. And it's obvious that their users don't want that, but they're still going through with it, right? But they're not dumb, as in they're very intelligent. They generally know what they're doing. So Apple is not a company I'm letting off with. I mean, they're not saying this, obviously, but I wouldn't let them off with, hey, we didn't realize this was happen. I think it sounds like, if I say this, sounds like a conspiracy, but I don't think it is a conspiracy. I think. My personal theory is that Apple is a company like any other, like Google and like Facebook, and that they make money and have an interest in tracking you and tracking their users, and that their whole privacy, we don't track people, we just sell hardware, it's just PR, propaganda, and they're just pretending that, and in reality, they're as interested as Google is, or as Facebook is, in getting this information. So I think so it's not really a conspiracy because it's just in their own interest. They're not conspiring with Google or with advertisers. It's just in their own interest in the first place. And I think what they did is they made a move that technically looks like it's helping the user, but they knew that people were getting around this. And what is basically happening, if I understand this correctly? So if you read into this study, and if you read into what the Washington Post writes about it, then they're saying, they're explaining tracking and all that, but something curious happens after you ask not to be tracked. According to the investigation by researchers at privacy software maker Lockdown and the Washington Post, us. Subway surfers, that's one of the apps they looked at again, start sending an outside ad company called Chartboost 29 very specific data points about your iPhone, including your internet address, your free storage, your current volume level to 3 decimal points, and even your battery level to 15 decimal points. It's the kind of unique data that could be used by advertisers to identify your iPhone, possibly letting them know what other apps you use or how to target you. In other words, it's sidestepping your request to be left alone. You can't stop it, and your privacy is worse off for it. So Apple says, okay, this is against the rules, and we don't want this. Actually, I'm switching from coffee to beer now. Got to mellow out the caffeine high here. Cheers. Yeah, I'm having a lovely local Füchschen Alt. And that is not dirty. That means little. Füchschen is a diminutive form of Fuchs, which is also not dirty, which means fox in German. So it's a little Fox Alt. And Alt, of course, is the beer that this Düsseldorf is famous for. So cheers. Right. So they're basically fingerprinting your iPhone, right? I've got beer spillage. I need the beer sock. Quick. No, I actually don't need the beer sock. It's not that bad. So they say, our investigation found the iPhone's tracking protections are nowhere nearly as comprehensive as Apple's advertising might suggest. Surprise. We found at least 3 popular iPhone games share a substantial amount of identifying information with ad companies, even after being asked not to track. So basically, it's all just Apple propaganda. So what's very interesting is this part. As part of a technical change that arrived with iOS 14.5, the apps were no longer able to access one valuable piece of data, a kind of social security number for your iPhone known as the ID for advertisers, or IDFA. But there's other information that can identify your phone beyond that number. So what this IDFA is the following. So with iOS and Android, to track you, these companies, or tracking companies, but also like app developers, what they used to do is your phone has uniquely identifiable information, right? One is the IMEI number, the IMEI number. Then others, but let's assume that, right? That's a number that's hardware specific to the device. There's like a network MAC address on a network card, which your phone has, of course, as well. But this is like built into the phone. You can't change it. And they used to use that to identify you. So we're installed on this device, and then they could ask the OS to give them the IMEI number, right? IMEI. However you pronounce that, give them that, and then they could track you with that. That was a problem because you can't change that, right? Once they have that, it can never be changed. It's kind of like giving somebody your fingerprint, right? The problem with biometric data is that you can't change it, and that was like kind of like the fingerprint for your phone. And at some point, the OS makers figured out that wasn't good. Tracking people with that wasn't good. And they actually, I think Apple started this, they took the ability away for normal apps to just get that hardware ID number. And they introduced something called the IDFA, the ID for advertisers, which was kind of the same thing, a fixed ID that apps could read out and they could identify you with. But it had a feature that if you reinstalled the US, this number would change. Or you could actually change it manually. Or there was, I think in iOS, there was a setting where it like refreshed it every month or whatever. To make it harder to track you over a longer amount of time. I think it's still possible, even if it refreshes whatever, for an app, if it runs before and after the refresh, I guess. But, actually that was a step forward. But now, if you enable this tracking transparency thing, app tracking transparency, and you say, "Oh, I want to ask this app not to track," the app doesn't have access to this number anymore. So what they do now is they fingerprint your device, which is something that's been known from web developers for ages. Browser fingerprinting, right? You can follow somebody around the web by just, as a web server, you can query certain things about their system, right? Their their screen resolution, their browser window size, I don't know, whatever, how many other tabs there are open. I think you used to be able to do that. I don't think you can do that anymore with modern browsers. But you can query all kinds of things, like certain hardware stuff. And with that, you can build a pretty unique fingerprint of somebody, especially, right, if you have the IP address with that, right? The IP address, you can't track anybody really with that anymore because, well, it depends very much on your internet connection, but like, for example, with DSL, it changes all the time. That's changing again as well with IPv6, and if you have something like a fiber connection, usually it stays the same until you reboot your router or whatever. But like with a combination of that, you can just fingerprint somebody's device to such a degree that you can track them, especially if you can update it in real time. And on phones, they can do much more. As it says in this story, they can do the battery percentage, and they can track that, and they can track whatever, all these kind of things, the other apps you have installed, all this kind of crap. And that's how you can track people. So what's basically happening here is that Apple says, hey, we're privacy conscious now. If you want, you can disallow apps from tracking you with this advertiser ID that is specifically there so you can be tracked. And, it's a documented feature, and we actually put that in as a privacy thing back in the day. They can't do that anymore. So now they just fingerprint your device, which they could do before as well. I mean, it's not like that is... And it's not something I think that Apple, it's not document. It's not like Apple tells app developers they can do this, but everybody knows they can do it. Apple actually said in this, when they were asked by the Washington Post, they said that's against our rules, our terms of service. But obviously people are doing that. And I think Apple knows that they're doing that. If Apple didn't want that, they could probably do a lot of things. I mean, these apps use the operating system to get this information, right? So Apple could actually do a lot of things. Just don't give them the battery percentage at all, although some apps probably need that. Or not the decimal point. So it could do all kinds of things, right? But they're not doing this. Anyway, to wrap up what they said in the study. Here's some other stuff from the Washington Post. Among the apps lockdown investigated, tapping the Don't Track button made no difference at all to the total number of third-party trackers the apps reach out to. And the numbers of times the apps attempted to send out data to these companies declined just 13%. So basically what they're doing is they're still sending information. They're just not sending this ID. They're sending, other information that they can use to fingerprint you. When it comes to stopping third-party trackers, app tracking transparency is a dud. Worse, giving users the option to tap an ask app not to track button may even give users a false sense of privacy, this is the guy from the company who ran the story, said Lockdown co-founder Johnny Lin, a former Apple iCloud engineer. More worrisome for consumers, Lockdown says 3 of the apps it investigated, Subway Surfers, Streamer Live, and Run Rich 3D. Those fucking names, Jesus. I wouldn't even install games like this. The names are ridiculous. Appeared to be collecting data that could be used for a more invasive kind of tracking known as digital fingerprinting. All 3 also sent ultra-specific characteristics of the test iPhone to an ad company called Wangle that could allow app makers and advertisers to connect the dots and track you without your consent. So I think what this study pretty much shows is that the original assumption was right. There is, of course, there are reports out there that say that basically allege that this app tracking transparency works because it is allegedly hurting the advertising industry. That's a story. I mean, the Financial Times did some reporting on this. There's a story on The Verge and on Forbes. If you go to privatecitizen.press, I linked the Verge story. I can't. Basically, they're saying, there's Snapchat, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube lost around $10 billion in ad revenue following Apple's changes to its privacy practices. But these numbers, I can't verify this. this. I haven't found anything where it's like, okay, this is the hard data. This makes sense. 10 billion sounds like a drop in. I mean, it's a lot of money, but it sounds like a drop in the bucket if we're talking Snapchat, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, especially Facebook and YouTube. I don't think I don't buy these arguments. I personally think it stands to reason that if this feature really worked, and if we are actually private now on our phones, if we wanted to be, and we know from what we've seen, roughly 96% of people are opting out of this tracking. So that would mean to me that if this really, really worked, then all these companies, maybe not Google and Facebook, but like they would get hit seriously, and all these ad tracking companies would go out of business. I think they would be very quickly go bankrupt if they couldn't get this information. Right? We're talking phones, so we're talking basically where most of the revenue comes from for these things, for these apps and services these days. And we're talking iOS, which is okay. I mean, it's like 10% of the market, but it's a good slice, and it's also a very valuable chunk of the market. The iOS users are worth a lot more than Android users when it comes to this kind of thing, because they're the people generally willing to spend money on the internet. So in generally, the more expensive phones, they are high prestige segment of the market. It's kind of like, the BMW clientele, right? It's not the Vauxhall clientele, it's the BMW clientele. So they're actually worth a lot. And I think you would actually see a hit, and you would see these companies would, maybe not go bankrupt, maybe, I don't know. But like you'd see them, they'd have to drastically change their business model. And that isn't happening. I mean, you have this report from the Financial Times, but as far as I can tell, in reality, nothing much has changed. Everything is going on. The app, market is working as it was working before. And basically, surveillance capitalism is still in effect. This reminds me, I'm just putting that, I missed that tag. If you go to Private Citizen Press, there's handy tags in the show notes at the top. And surveillance capitalism is a handy tag where, lots of episodes. If you're interested in a certain topic, you can click on that and get tons of episodes on that topic. And basically, I mean, this kind of thing would have to really change, right? I think, if this actually worked. So I don't think it does work. So now comes call it a conspiracy theory if you want. I think it's common sense. My theory, and I've said this for a long time, I think Apple is a company like any other. I think they don't make as much of their revenue from advertising as Google or Facebook, because they're traditionally not good at online services. Apple has never been good at establishing online services. All their social networks failed. All of this, like they've been struggling with their music service. They may be getting it now with Apple TV or Apple Plus or whatever it's called. But I think that's largely due to Disney, being involved. But I don't think, like, if they were better at this stuff, and if they would, like, I've always strongly believed this. If Apple, for some reason now, had success with advertising and online tracking, they would shift their business to that. It's kind of like Google, right? It's not like when Google started, they want to make a search engine, and they, I think, somewhat stumbled into this. Hey, basically we can take the market that used to be classified ads in newspapers and take that, and then from there just basically take over the whole advertising market because everything's going on the internet and we can put ads everywhere. And they kind of stumbled into that. It's not like Google woke up one morning and Sergey Brin said, oh, we want to track everybody on the planet and serve them ads right on their eyeballs and ha ha ha, we evil. Right? This is not how it works. It's just they stumbled into a gold mine. And if Apple ever stumbles into a certain kind of, it's naive to think that they would go, no, we are an ethical company, which isn't the thing that exists, and we're not going to do that, right? Oh, these people want to throw billions at us, but we already have billions from our hardware, so we don't need any more billions. That's not how companies work. So I think they just traditionally weren't good at this stuff, and that's why they're not leading the market. And they've kind of embraced that as well by, using it for propaganda, going, this is our PR now. We are the privacy conscious company, and we're the ones who want to give you privacy. But I don't think they really want to. So they do things like this. I called this in August already. I called this a smokescreen. I think this is what this is. This is a feature that on the surface makes the user happy. And it gives the user the idea that, oh, we're doing something for your privacy. When in fact, they're actually worse off. They're clicking a button, they think, okay, I'm private now. When in fact, these apps are now just tracking you with another mechanism. It's kind of like Google. I've talked about on this here before on this new project Flock, which they kind of abandoned now, which I wanted, keep everybody up to date on. But of course, it's kind of dead now because everybody criticized that. But it's kind of Google saying, hey, we want to get away from third-party cookies, right? It's not like Google saying we don't want to track you anymore all of a sudden. It's like, the press has been talking about like third-party cookies for so long now that even like people on the street are starting to realize how this tracking stuff works. So we need to move to something else, right? And on the web, it's very similar to this app tracking transparency. It's actually pretty much the same. Okay, we don't use cookies anymore. We use fingerprinting now, whatever. Like we fingerprint your browser. Right? And so what I find hilarious is that, speaking of the press, my colleagues in the tech press, when Google goes, we want to get rid of third-party cookies and we have this privacy-conscious alternative, the press goes, ha, 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 we don't believe you. You're Google. You're evil. Right? The tech press. Most of the tech press. When Apple goes, hey, we're the privacy-friendly company and we see that you're being tracked in our operating system. We want to get rid of that. And here's our feature that does that. The tech press goes, great. Look at Apple, the best company in the world. They know how these things are done. They're amazing. Look at that. Right? That's their instinct. And I've never understood this because, they're both companies. It's just like one isn't inherently better than the other. Right? It's just like companies have a certain reputation, and then some people prefer that company to that company, even though they might have just gotten unlucky in the past and got that reputation. It's kind of like I don't know, what is it, like ExxonMobil and their fucking when they ran that ship aground and whatever, and you're like, oh yeah, they're the worst oil company. And it's like every other fucking oil company has tankers as well. They could run, they could have a drunk captain run the ship aground and destroy an ecosystem tomorrow. So it's not like, hey, no, ExxonMobil is evil, but hey, Royal Dutch Shell, they were amazing. They're essentially the same company and they're doing the same things. It's like, Apple and Google are essentially the same fucking company. Yeah, Google, by the way they developed, got a bit more into the online side of things and in the advertising, part of it. And Apple is more into they make more money selling hardware, but essentially they're both making a smartphone OS. They're both making the same thing with all the same features, right? I mean, I don't understand how people, I mean, I'm probably preaching to the choir, but I just got to vent on this because I don't understand how people like, okay, in the mainstream press and people just on the street, they just don't realize, they just believe what the press tells them, and they don't know any better. But like the tech press should know. Like, if Apple was that privacy conscious, all these ability, so if you have an app in iOS and you have an app in Android, you have the same kind of abilities to track a user, right? If Apple was like, oh, we're the privacy OS from the start, the apps wouldn't even be able to access this information. They wouldn't have been able to track you from the beginning. Like, it's obvious that they're doing the same thing. They just have better PR. I don't get it. But I feel like I'm kind of belaboring the point. I just wanted to wrap this up, and I think we can wrap this topic up, and we have the study now, and I think we now can conclude ultimately that app tracking transparency is in fact bullshit. It is pretty much a bullshit feature that just, denies apps access to one ID, and then they just track you differently. And as the Washington Post pointed out already in this article, they did research on this, and they asked Apple. They told Apple about this, like this tracking, and then Apple was like, "Oh, it's against our rules." And we don't like it, but nothing changed. Nothing at all changed, right? Apple didn't say, oh, we're investigating this and we're cutting this off. Like, they just didn't change anything. And I mean, this was I did some research, of course, before I started this show. So this original story in the Washington Post is from September, the end of September. Nothing has changed since then. Apple didn't go like, okay, sorry, our bad. Obviously, this app tracking transparency doesn't work. They're still tracking you. And we're changing it now. Like, we are rolling out this feature, we're doing that, or whatever. We're kicking people off the App Store. They've done exactly nothing. Which tells you from where the wind's blowing. This tells you that it's a smoke screen. It's not, right? It's not what it pretends to be. So I think we can bury this topic now. Just as an update, I know it's a little bit late, me talking about this, but I think it was important enough to go back to it. And I know there's some stuff from DuckDuckGo that supposedly does this better. I have to look into that a little bit. I just didn't have the resources right now because NaNoWriMo and stuff. But if you think there's a better alternative, if you think there is ways of helping you stop this tracking on your phone, please let me know. Go to privatecitizen.press and contact me, and I'll talk about it in a upcoming episode. Now, if you were to do this, that would be feedback, which is the thing we're talking about next. Right, and we, of course, have a new thing here on the show. We have a forum. Well, it's not specifically for the show. It's the Fab Industries forum. It's for my website and blog, and it's also for all my other projects. But there is a forum on there, on forum.fab.industries, which actually I linked to this forum in the show notes as they stand right now, as I'm recording the show, and I haven't linked to the, where is it? To the actual podcast, to the Private Citizen forum. I should link to that. So I can do that because we have a specific forum for the podcast, which I would urge you to sign on there. It's Discord. It's pretty cool. Discourse. I'm sorry. It's pretty cool. It works really well. I'm using a hosting company. Obviously not running this myself. I don't have the time to administer a forum. Well, I moderate it, admin the forum, but run the fucking software myself. So I'm actually I'm paying a company to do this, but they're in the Netherlands and they're respecting the GDPR, which is great. So that's pretty cool. Now, why am I saying all this? I'm saying all of this because I've set up the forum, and we actually already. So I'm posting for every episode. I'm posting, link when it releases, and I'm creating a thread, and we already had some really good feedback on the previous episode, episode 696, and that's so the feedback I'm talking about right now, this is all from the forum, and of course there's also a link in the show notes to the forum post. But we had Captain Egghead, and Captain Egghead raised an important point. Captain Egghead is from Israel, and I wanted to I obviously responded to him on the forum as well, but I also want to respond to him on the show because I think he has some good points, and they were probably popped into your mind when you listened to the episode. So I think it's good for everybody to hear his points, and I summarized them a little bit, and then I'm gonna respond to them quickly. So Captain Egghead said, "So in this episode, you repeated the statement that the Nazis, quote, persecuted a religion, which sounds a bit dissonant to me. Like in the case of my previous correction, this was way back then, Galileo and the round earth, I think that the reason that this irks me is because it reinforces a misconception which is effectively used for the propaganda of certain groups. However, in this case, I believe that usage of this terminology comes from trying to avoid to use the word race, which in turn goes back to episode 22, Stand Together Not Divided, and some related topics on which I have comments, but believe that explaining clearly where my views differ from yours would take a long time. That is why I kept postponing this feedback until now. For me, this kind of writing is not a regular effort, and it takes several iterations to become coherent enough." Well, you're doing well. Is all I can say. It's very coherent feedback. First of all, although the Nazi leadership cared a lot about political beliefs, to the best of my knowledge, they did not care about religion, other than as a tool to serve the state. Certainly the persecution of Jews and the Roma people did not depend on their religious beliefs. If you were a Jew by birth, you were an enemy of the state. No belief or statement of loyalty could save you from that. Only documents proving the Aryan, quote, Aryan blood of your grandparents. Well, if you only had one Jewish grandparent, then you would be a Mischling zweiten Grades, so you could live as a German but without getting castrated, provided you followed the restrictions and did not look too Jewish. Saying that the Nazis persecuted a religion reinforces the misconception that the persecution depended on anything that the persecuted people thought, did, or believed. This misconception serves the cause of people who want to deny or diminish the Holocaust, through the usual divide and conquer thinking. You're right, it's not your writing that's a problem. It's my reading and my lack of sleep. I'm sorry. Quote, surely that would not happen to me. Sure, persecution due to religion is also a bad thing that should be banned, but it was certainly not the main case in Nazi Germany. Now, what I want to point out here is that generally I agree with Captain Egghead. I think this is and we pretty much agreed to this on the forum as well. This is a terminology issue. I'm going to go into the race part of it a bit later because I still think that's important and worth reiterating. But first about the religion thing. I said this because it is a factually correct statement. I want to point out that, Judaism is a religion. Not according to the Nazis, but according to today's, if you study history, if you write a historic paper and you talk about somebody being a Jew, you're talking about the religion. It's like somebody's a Christian, right? He's a member of a Christian faith. Whereas a Jew is a believer in Judaism. Of course, if you're talking about the historic context, and this is where Captain Egghead is, of course, right, it's not the same thing, because the Nazis, and this is why I don't like the term race. Just to very quickly recap, we pretty much agreed on the forum that at some point I'm gonna have to do some history episodes, because I studied history and I'm very interested in the subject, and it's obvious to me and to some other listeners that a lot of people are not as educated as they could be, let's put it that way, on these topics, and I would like to educate people on this, but it's going to be a lot of work, and I certainly can't attack that this year, but I might try next year. But just to quickly recap this, right? So the Nazis, what they did is, and they didn't invent this, this goes back to the start of the 20th century, end of the 19th century. There was, people these days call it a pseudoscience, although it wasn't a pseudoscience back then. It was actual science back then. It's actually a good argument for how scientific consensus can be wrong. You know, if it was the consensus at the time, but it got disproven. So basically, back in the day, they didn't know about genes, as in they didn't know how the DNA worked, right? But they knew about genes from the Mendel kind of thing, right? You had Darwin, and you had from Mendel you had beginnings of genetics, right? You had an understanding of these are traits in certain animals, for example, right? And you have white fur, and then you have black fur, and if you cross them, you get like checkered fur or gray fur or whatever, right? So you had an understanding of breeding and of basically what we now know are phenotypes, right? So the expression of genes in a living creature. And they had the beginning of this understanding, and that got worked into a theory which is completely bullshit, we know today, but back then was actual scientific, on the forefront of scientific thinking, which was that there are races in humans. Like, you would say you have in dogs, for example, like they would say there are certain races. There's Asian, people of Asian descent, and there's people of African descent. And this is, of course, not completely wrong, because humans have phenotypes. And of course, there are genes, there are genes that encode black skin, for example, right? That's a phenotype. That's a certain combination of genes, and that gives you black skin. And you can, of course, observe the same rules that you have with Mendel, that you have with peas and with rabbits, right? That if you have a human with very light skin, and you have a human with very dark skin, and they have a kid, it tends to have a skin tone in the middle of that. That's how genes work. But what they tried to do back then is to create a theory of like races, and that's biologically absolute bullshit. In biology, you have species, and that's it. Right? And the definition of a species is if animals from two different species cannot have offspring that can reproduce. They might have offspring. You have a horse, you have a donkey, you get a mule, but the mule can't reproduce. That's how you very clearly scientifically define what the species is. Below that or above that, it gets very complicated. Like, taxonometry, for example. Like, there have been so many discussions about even like what are fungi, like what kingdom of animals are there in, like, is this animal, how related is this animal to that? If you go into all of this, it gets very fuzzy. Like, it's not as easy to define as a species. And the same thing is with race. What they back then decided were human races is basically just certain phenotypes, right? And anyway, let's not go deeper into that. What the Nazis did with Jews was basically saying these people, and we basically agreed on the forum that there are two definitions for Jews. There's there's the scientific definition, which is it's a religion that's clearly defined, and that would mean like you're a Jew if if you're of Jewish faith, right? Which means if you're born and you're, I don't know, I don't even know, I don't know enough about Jewish faith if it's like baptism, but you're of Jewish faith, and then you convert to Christianity, you stop being a Jew, Christian. But then there's also the other definition, which makes it complicated. For example, is used by the Israeli state, which I always had issues with. But there's also the definition of Jews as let's say, a cultural group, which is I don't like to use because it's very, 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 very fuzzy, and I think it's very unscientific and it doesn't help. It's like trying to define a Muslim cultural group, right? It's easy to say somebody's of Muslim faith, but you have Muslims in Africa, and you have Muslims in the Middle East, and you have Muslims in Asia. And if you look at their culture and their society and their sociological habits or whatever, beyond the actual religion, they would be extremely different, right? If they didn't have the religion in common, beyond that, what food they eat, what they wear, how they behave in public, anything that's not governed actually by the religion is very, very different. So you can't say that a Muslim from the Philippines and a Muslim from Iran is like the same culture group. They're not at all. And it's, of course, different with Judaism just for historic reasons, because Jews have been persecuted ever since, the Roman times. So they tend to be a more homogeneous culture group. But still, if you look before the Nazis, if you look at the Middle Ages, Europe, and you had Jews all over Europe and all the different kingdoms, whatever, and there were large societal differences back then. But I don't like to talk about this, like, for example, Jews as a culture group because of that. But what the Nazis did, if you look at it very high level, they took two things that were at the forefront of, for better or worse, scientific thinking back then. Race theory, and they took something which was less scientific and more a societal theory, which is called the völkische Gedanke, or the folk theory, which came out of Germany, out of Germany's specific historic background, i.e. one of the latest geopolitical entity in Europe to become a nation state, right? You had for hundreds of years before Bismarck unified Germany in 1871, you had people that would call themselves German, but they didn't have a passport. They didn't live in one country. They lived in the Kingdom of Saxony, or they lived in the Kingdom of Austria, or they lived in the Kingdom of Kleve, which is where I am right now. But they would call themselves German. But there was no such thing as, being a German. It was not like being French, where for hundreds of years you had a nation state that was called France. So there was this völkische theory, which was like this kind of thing trying to unite these very disparate Germans in an idea of stylized, like a little bit pseudoscientific, like if you're German and you're Nordic and you're like, the Germanic tribes, and there's like a shared culture, which is utter bullshit, because there was very few shared German culture back then. If you're looking before 1871, right, before the actual German Reich as a nation state was founded by Bismarck. Before that, you had the Deutsche Bund, or let's say you had the Holy Roman Empire, right? The Heiliges Römisches Reich Deutscher Nation. You had, for example, Austria was a part of that. And let's say, Prussia was a part of that, or Schleswig, right, in the north of Germany. And the people from Schleswig and the people from Austria would be extremely different. Yeah, they would speak German. That was a common thing, but it was also very different German. And if you go back in history more, then it would probably not be the same German. But like culturally, they would be extremely different. Like some would be Catholic, some would be Protestant, some incredibly different. And you would never get the idea that they're one folk. And to unify that, the Nazis used this idea, this völkische idea. And then they took, basically to make Germans into a monolithic, unified thing. And what they then did is they created an enemy. And they, because they were anti-Semitic, they used the Jews as this enemy. And now it becomes clear why they, if you say today, yes, Judaism is a religion, they persecuted a religion, which is technically correct, which of course, Captain Eckhead is right. They didn't persecute a religion because they couldn't just go, okay, we have the German folk and we have its mortal enemies, the Jews. And then you go, well, that's a religion. So the Jews go, oh, I don't want to be your mortal enemy. I'm converting to Christianity. And then your enemy is gone. So what they needed was to make the Jews as monolithic, to make the Jew, as they would say in their propaganda, something you can't change because it is race, because it is tied to some, from today's point of view, you would say pseudoscientific, false idea that you have human races and you have, if somebody's Jewish, they have a crooked nose, and if somebody's German, they're blonde, right? Which is utter bullshit. We have, of course, I'm live streaming this on Twitch, and we have super user. For the example of Schleswig, they would speak Danish, not even German. Yes, or like Low German, right? Or Platt. So this is what I said on the forum. Like, Captain Eckert, I was discussing, he was like, what would you, like, you sound like you want to deny that there's a German ethnicity. And I would say, yeah, I deny this very much. There is no such thing because the Germans didn't exist before 1781, right? You'd have, for example, Schleswig or the north of Germany is a good example. You have the area that is what's Friesland in English? Damn it. Frisia, right? You have North Frisia. So the southern part of Frisia is in the Netherlands, and the northern part is in Germany. And historically speaking, from like back in the Middle Ages, that was like one area, and they would speak Low German, Platt. And then for some reason now some of them are Dutch and some of them are German. Although culturally they're much closer to each other than to either Germans for better or worse, or Dutch for better or worse. Subius also says, whoa, we're getting völkisch here. I hope Twitch doesn't suddenly disappear. I hope so too. If they do, this is why I'm just, live streaming this on the site, privatecitizen.press. That's why I do a podcast, and it's where's my soundbite for this?
Yeah, it's a great time to be a podcaster
because they can't put that, cancel that for some weird reason. Because why would they? What I'm doing here is I'm trying to, pass on knowledge I learned about, I don't know, it must have been 10 years ago now at university, right? There was a war about Schleswig in 1861, if memory serves right, between Prussia and Denmark. Well, not really. The Deutsch-Danish. It was more Bismarck solidifying the northern border. It wasn't really about Schleswig. But also, Schleswig is a good example because there was a plebiscite and they basically decided, okay, we want to be in Denmark and we want to be part of Germany. So now you have people on this road being in Germany and on that road they're in Denmark, right? That doesn't mean they're culturally German if they're on this side, right? They might speak Danish. Or there are people who ended up on the Danish side of the border who spoke German. So it's like, it's not like the border. And this is why these whole ideas that you can say, oh, this is one folk and this is the other and they're mortal enemies, is total bullshit, because something like that doesn't exist. Just as race doesn't exist, because, right? It's like, this always surprised me. I think that's why I try to avoid the word race. I talked about this in this episode, Stand Together, Not Divided, that I think these terms I mean, racism, yes. Of course, racism exists. I just don't like the term. I mean, I don't know if xenophobia is a better term. But the term race is an idea that comes from the Nazi background. If you use it, you're basically putting credence into this bullshit theory, right? And people who get into this must understand this. So I always have this issue with Americans who continue to use this term race, even though their history shows them that it's complete bullshit. I mean, if you look at the history of black people in the US and the civil rights movement, you have all these ideas. Like back then you had schools that only black people could attend, and they would do something called a paperback test. They would hold a paperback next to your head. And if your skin color was lighter than that paperback, then you weren't black enough to go to that school, right? So that, I mean, skin color is literally a gradient, right? Right? You have people of all skin colors, from the whitest, like most northern European skin to the blackest deep sub-Saharan African skin. And because of the way genetics works, if you have people having sex with each other and breeding, like their children get like a mixed skin color, and then they breed. Like, wasn't there a comedian? Was it Bill Bailey or somebody who said, if we just like this whole thing will just go away in a few thousand years because we'll keep interbreeding, and at the end we're all one skin color. That's exactly in the middle. It's probably what now is like, I don't know, like Indian kind of skin color or something, right? Indian, I mean, they have like, it's a spectrum as well. But, you have like some light brown, a little bit darker than my skin and whiter than most black people. So it's like this whole idea that you have race is just idiotic, because like if you look at the human's DNA, how fucking complicated it is, and you get all these eye shapes and nose shapes and head shapes and skin colors, and it will all mix up and it will all end up like that. That's exactly why doing something like saying, if you have that nose or if your skull is that shape, you're Jewish, is absolutely idiotic. Right? So, but my point being, I didn't want to take away from that. I think Captain Eckert is completely right. Of course, the Nazis didn't prosecute the Jews because of their religion. The thing I was just saying is that being Jewish is a religion from today's scientific standpoint. That's the only thing you can, like, if you're going scientifically and you want binary, that's the only thing. If you code a database, that's the only thing you can put in, right? You can ask somebody, are you of Jewish faith, yes or no? Like, you can't ask somebody, is your culture Jewish? Like, I don't know what like. But of course it's very complicated. Let's say I grow up in Israel, and my parents are Jewish and I'm Jewish, and then I'm converting to Islam or Christianity, or I'm becoming an atheist, right? Am I still Jewish? As in the religion, no. But I'm still part of the diaspora or whatever you want to call it. Like, I still have that history, right? I still, like, my parents were fleeing from Germany because they were killing people in gas chambers, right? Just me changing that religion is not taking any of that away. But what I was trying to do is I wanted to use actual scientifically correct terms, and I don't want to use terms like race, which is bullshit and doesn't exist. And you can't. Anybody, I mean, I know it exists in a way that it's in official government documents in countries, but that doesn't mean it's correct. And I don't think it's a good term to use, because it's being used to divide people, as I said in that episode. Yes, I believe in black people's rights, but I believe in I believe in Asian people's rights. I believe in white people's rights, I believe in yellow people's rights, and if they're green people, I believe in their rights too. And I think if you just continue to hammer, even if you mean well, even if you are progressive and you are the best meaning of people, by reusing this term and by hammering this down, you just reinforce that people are different. again and again and again. And I know they're different in some respect. I know there's people who live, they live flat over there. They have very dark skin. They have very different skin than me. But what does that matter? Right? That's just, how is that? Like, why would I choose? I'm going to talk about this in episode 100, for example. I was never brought up that way. Like, why would I decide to treat that person differently just because they have different skin color? We're all very different. I have glasses. They might not have glasses. I have short hair. They have long hair. I have a beard. They might not have a beard. They might not have the ability to grow a beard. They might have breasts. I might not. Like, why would you treat somebody differently? I want to get away from that. That's my goal, and that's just what I was trying to do. Superuser says, I would argue Jewish is still a race, both in the notion of secular Jews and the basis for the state of Israel. The first president of the country was an atheist. Let's not forget, and it's ostensibly secular. I have many issues with that. You can say a country is ostensibly secular, but it really is not. It really is not. Also, like, how would you argue? Like, you can't argue that. You can't argue that Jews are race because the race does not exist. Scientifically, there's no such thing as race. How would you define that? Right? They're an ethnicity. Right? They're a group of people that are, we had this discussion. Maybe I can explain it this way. So on the forum, I can't remember who it was, but I could look it up, but it's not that important. Somebody said, might have been even Astral, I think. There are websites where you can send in your DNA, and they profile your racial background. They go like, your race is Caucasian, or your race is I don't know, you're African American descendant, or you're Jewish, or whatever. And I know that exists, but that doesn't prove anything. The thing is, you can use the DNA. DNA works like this. You have base pairs, right? And they constitute genes. And these genes encode things, right? These genes encode proteins, and your body reads out the DNA, makes the proteins, and the proteins do things, right? They're neurotransmitters, or they go into certain parts of the cell, and then the cell does something. For example, your DNA might encode proteins that will tell your skin when you are born and you become a human, that tell your skin to produce melanin more than other skin, and you'll get darker skin. So you can say that. You can look at somebody's DNA and say, well, this gene sequence tells me that their skin will be that color. You can do that. But it already gets different with like when is somebody black? Is that brown? Is that black? Like, what are we doing? Are we using Pantone colors? Like, that's already hard to do. Now, if you go like, I can say their nose will be a certain shape. Like, how do you define the shape of a nose, right? There are easy things. You can say, okay, this tells me they're going to have a vagina and breasts and a female reproductive tract. So we could probably say they're female. And this tells me, this encodes that they will get a penis and testicles. So it looks, and they'll have beard growth, and they'll have more testosterone in their body than estrogen. So you can say, hey, this is a male person. But you can't say this guy is African American. Not really scientifically. What you can do is you can look at people who are descendant, who are from Africa, and you can look at people where they're from Africa, and you can compare their DNA. And then you can compare that to DNA of somebody who maybe comes from like Russia or whatever, like from that direction of the planet. And then you can go, these people have this in common. And this will tell me that based on their ancestry, like who of their forebears had sex with the other people, that probably they came from this direction, right? And then, of course, in America, that's very interesting because it's a nation of immigrants, and you go like historically, there were no European people in this country a few hundred years ago. Now there are a lot. So you can go, oh, look, these people have a phenotype or have genes that encode a phenotype that they have in common. So, and people with this phenotype are usually found in Italy. So you can go, oh, they're probably Italian descendant to a certain degree. You can do that. I mean, that's valid, and it's probably right. It will be right, but it's not scientific, right? It's not really scientific. It's more like a guess. And you can only do that in the US. Like, try to do that in Germany, right? I mean, my family, for example, my father's side is from around here, the Ruhr area. My grandmother's side is from Pomerania, which is now actually Poland, but wasn't back then. So, like, if you go, like, I'm Polish descendant, not really. When my family lived there, it was part of Germany. Like, you can't even, it's because, like, Europe is closer together and all these countries are very small, and people go across the border and have sex with other people from across the border all the time. It's all so intermingled that you can't even fucking tell anything apart. And the only places where you can do that is when there is like a, in recent history, there was a special thing. Like, you'd have a huge continent that was full of indigenous people and was then invaded by the Europeans, right? So you have the US, Canada, Australia. In those places, you can go, oh, these are like Irish descendants. Or if you have something like, massive massive persecution of a certain, not a religion, as we talked about, a certain ethnic group, cultural group, right? And you basically have millions of those people killed, and everybody else had to flee. And then they go somewhere completely different and create a state there, right? In a territory that was originally inhabited by people who look completely different because they have a completely different skin color, and then you can suddenly go, hey, yes, you look like you belong to that country and not the other one. But only in what I would call, it's not artificial because it's history, but it's like more of an artificial situation, right? Where you have a country created out of nothing, and people just go somewhere, like across hundreds or thousands of miles, and then settle somewhere. In anything where you have like a homogeneous growth of countries and of cultures over hundreds and thousands of years, you can't tell these things apart, right? You can't look at me and go, oh, you're more a Germanic tribe descendant than Roman descendant. No, because the fucking Roman Empire fell apart. Everybody fucked literally everybody else, and 500 years later, you can't tell, right? So it just doesn't work like that. I mean, the whole, that's where the race thing falls apart. If you go Caucasian race, right? The Caucasian so-called race is like Spanish, Italian, Slavic descendant people, like people from Sweden, and then it goes like almost into the Middle East, right? And if you look at the phenotype of somebody who's from fucking Norway and somebody who's from southern Spain, just look at their skin color. These people are not the same skin color, right? Like, why are those people a race? And why are people who are like from the deepest sub-Saharan Africa who are black, right? And then you have people from, I don't know, somewhere else where they're also black, but they're a lot lighter black, right? And how is that blackness when you're like from Africa? How is that the same supposed like race than an Aborigine from Australia, who has a completely different phenotype because they were isolated for hundreds of thousands of years on a whole different side of the planet. This whole theory doesn't add up. This doesn't hold up to anything. Anyway, Super User says, just to add, by this I mean the definition has shifted, but papers from the 60s and before used them interchangeably, for example. It said something else. also see things like Jewish humor as an example. Race, ethnicity are synonymous. Appreciate some make race about skin color, though. I appreciate some. No, race and ethnicity are not synonymous, because race is a very specific term that is tied to genetics, whereas ethnicity is more heavily dominated by culture. Race has nothing to do with culture, right? Not in the original definition. Ethnicity, if you mean that, ethnicity is the term to use, right? So if you're like, I don't know, African American descendant in the US, that's an ethnicity, right? You have certain things in common, especially culturally, especially if you grew up in the South, stuff like that, right? And then you have, I don't know, Yankees, people from like New England, right? Who have a very different ethnicity. Not only is their skin color different, they also have a very different culture. So ethnicity, I think, is the term to use. You want to use. In most cases, when people say race, what they mean is ethnicity. They mean a certain collection of attributes, culturally, of the person's phenotype, so what they look like, that are like immediately recognizable, right? Anybody can go, yes, I think that person's black and that person's white. But if you go down to define what that actually means, it gets very, very complicated. Like, how black is somebody to be black, right? At what point are you still white? When are you brown? Is that even a thing? Is that a race? So I would love to show. There's a great video, which I don't know. I'm probably gonna link in the show notes. I'm gonna have to look that up now. But it's German, so this is why I can't really. Otherwise, I would have put it in the show notes. It's oh god. No, I don't even know what that guy's name is because I haven't slept enough. Now I need to look up who this guy is. Give me a second here. Mark Benecke. So there's a great German. He's actually a politician in the Partei now. Mark Benecke is a forensic biologist. He's very famous in Germany for to be like what was he called? The Madenpapst at some point, the Pope of maggots, because he does stuff like for the police, they find a very old body and he goes like, okay, this kind of maggot tells me that this person is this long dead and whatever. He's great. He's a great guy. He gives talks. I've seen him give talks. He's really good. So he does like forensic science and stuff like that. And he has a great talk, which I'm going to link in the show notes, which if you're German is well worth watching, where he basically explains why race is bullshit, like from the point of a actual forensic biologist. And he could explain it much better than I ever could. But Caucasian is a Georgian and Armenian area. Well, that's what the Caucasus is, but like Caucasian is the American, as Superior points out, it's like the US Census definition for being white, which is of course complete bullshit because there's so many. As being black, as like, if you look at Africa and you look at the people from the very north of Africa and you look at the people from the middle of Africa and from the south, they're very, very different. So to say they're all like black and they're one race is just completely idiotic. Like saying all Europeans are white and are therefore somehow the same. Like, if you don't believe me, if you ever manage to do this, get a Norwegian and a Spanish, preferably two people who speak English very well, and get them together and have drinks and then start discussing life, and you will realize how they could be from different planets. Like, the alcohol thing will already be challenging because they will not agree on what to drink, This is what it starts with. And then they'll have religious. Oh, sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm gesticulating wildly like somebody of Italian descent. The Italian or the Spanish will just gesticulate wildly, while the Norwegian will just sit there like a statue. And then they will have religious wars about bread, about wine, about beer, about how to eat fish, about literally anything. Anything. The weather, clothing, anything you can think of. They are so incredibly different, like culturally, that going like, and you would never say they're the same ethnicity. So why do you say they're the same race? Just because like they have the same skin color. Maybe we just need a term for like skin, but it's bullshit. Okay, I propose if you really wanna segregate people for better or worse, if you really want to judge people on their skin color, we need to start using Pantone color codes. Otherwise, this is all. I'm gonna suggest this from now on. But anyway, I think we've debated this to death, and it seems I'm still live on Twitch, so that's pretty cool. We'll see if YouTube cuts me off again for speaking the truth or whatever they cut me off for last time. This is why I do podcasts.
Yeah, it's a great time to be a podcaster.
Private Citizen. PrivateCitizen.press. That was Adam Curry, by the way. We also had Bear the Will. Of course, links, Private Citizen.press, links to all of these and the forum topic. We had a wider discussion. It's really, I love that I started this podcast. That too. This forum. There's some really, really good discussion in that topic. Go there, check it out. Anyway, Bear the Will commented on episode 96. Same episode, different topic. And I respond to him in the forum as well, but I want to respond here as well. Oh, Captain Eckhead's actually live, providing live feedback right now. Just noting that still a lot of things we can argue about. Will take time. Your summary was fine. Just do not get the impression that I agree with everything you said, even in this episode. No, I don't. And please, you were very restrained, as in, I didn't want to take too much bandwidth in the forum. I can't speak for all the other people there, but I think it's okay. Post as much as you want. Also feel free to just open a topic somewhere in the off topic section, and we'll debate this further. I love this. I mean, obviously we don't agree, but I think what I was trying to say is I think we agree on more than it would look on the surface. I think we're disagreeing a lot more on terminology than on actual substance. But I think it's very important. Like, I mean, what you said, this is why I put your feedback in the show, because I think people might have misunderstood what I was saying, and I wanted to clarify that. So I think that's very important. But anyway, let's go to Barry Williams, who says, some feedback regarding vaccine mandates. In general, I'm somewhat for vaccine mandates, perhaps more so at the company level than the government. You need to be vaccinated to work at certain jobs, to attend more risky events like concerts without physical distancing, etc. Few comments you made, I take issue with. I'm going to respond to the comments. I am completely okay for you to be for vaccine mandates. That's okay. I'm just against it, especially on the background of the German Constitution. I do think it's discriminating. And so when you say you needed to be vaccinated to work at certain jobs, that is true. That was true in Germany for some years now. But it was never so that the general public needed to be vaccinated. That is something that they introduced interestingly for the measles vaccine in the change to the Infektionsschutzgesetz in 2020. And now obviously they're including it for SARS-CoV-2. But we never had that. It used to be, yes, if you wanted your kids in a certain kindergarten, your kids had to be vaccinated, right? This is like, and I'm okay as long as it's a choice, right? We talked about on this show a lot, especially with privacy, about like when is something an actual choice, right? When the whole state forces you in one direction, even though you're not like, get vaccinated or you'll be arrested. And they did that in Germany now. They have the rule that you need to be tested or vaccinated to go to work now. And that your employer has to check that. I don't know if I got into that last episode. But because of the huge financial burden, I mean, they pay like 2 tests a week. And so you have to pay the other 3. But the huge financial burden, and like everybody has a job. I mean, they can't be like happy like me freelancing from home, everybody. So at that point, I feel like it's basically the state, because the state made the law. It's basically the state forcing you to do that. And I think I don't agree with that. And I don't think people have to be vaccinated, but we'll get into that. And Super User says, my dad is a dentist. He's triple vaxxed and has a low opinion of anti-vax people. He's also anti-mandate. However, he strongly believes that they should give up their right to free medical care. What is your take on this? By the way, he was a bit tipsy at the time, so not sure how legit he was. I'm going to get into that with Barry, but I don't think, like, no, they should not give because it's not free medical care, right? I don't know what country you're from. In Germany, we have a public health system, which means everybody pays for it, right? So the people who don't want to get vaccinated, they pay the same amount of money into the healthcare system as anybody else. And you can't have the definition of a public healthcare system is it belongs to everybody. You can't go, oh, this is a healthcare system that is there that you have to pay into by law because it belongs to all of us. But as soon as you make that medical decision for your body, you're not part of it. I mean, if you start doing that, yeah, smokers. Why do smokers have the right to healthcare? Why do people who ride a motorcycle have the right to healthcare? I'm much more likely to end up in a hospital than anybody else. But even though I've never been in a hospital a day of my life, toi, 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 as we say in Germany, knock on wood, right? So I've been paying into this for the last 20 years since I've had a job. I've never been a day in a hospital, right? There have been people who've been in the hospital for those 20 years who haven't paid into it. I'm not saying it's not fair. That's how the system works. But if we have a system like this, then it's for everybody. And, you know, and I respect, like, if people have a religion and they say, because of this religion, I can't do this. I don't want that medical procedure. I don't want this pre-check or whatever, you know, what do you call the routine checkups or whatever. Or if I just don't want to have a routine, I don't give a fuck. That's their personal opinion. And the thing is, the argument is always, oh, it's cost the healthcare system so much. We've been cutting the fucking healthcare system. We've been cutting the money we're putting into that for the last 20 fucking years, including in the fucking pandemic. You can't just go, oh, the state doesn't have the money. Oh, let's buy a few more Eurofighters, which don't fucking work. That's just, like, that argument is just bullshit. But anyway, sorry for that rant. Super says, also, as a dentist, he's in a privileged financial position that might influence his youth. Yeah, exactly. What's his problem? Devil's advocate, motorbike injuries are an insured risk as is smoking through tobacco taxes, though down this line of thinking, we could end up like the book 84K. I don't even offhand don't know what book that is. Yeah, I mean, it is insured, but really, I don't no, it's not really, because, you know, my motorcycle is insured, but that is insurance for damage I cause to other cars or other people. Like, my own risk if I ride a motorcycle into a wall is covered by my health insurance, which isn't higher because I'm a motorcyclist. And I don't want it to be high. That's the point. Like, that's the other argument. You could say, oh, you're a motorcyclist, you have to pay more. Oh, you're not vaxxed, you have to pay more. Oh, you smoke, you have to pay more. And the fucking healthcare system works. It's not like it's collapsing because now all the unvaccinated people are destroying the healthcare system. No, what's destroying, actually, again, sorry, I have to rant on this, but it's just like, this is a pet peeve of mine. What's destroying the fucking healthcare system is idiotic politicians who go, oh, this has to be privatized. This has to make money. Why does a hospital have to make money? Why? That doesn't make any sense. It's a public institution. It's paid by the public for the public to make the public healthy. It doesn't have to make money. It doesn't have to be a company. Who came up with this idea? Why? What are these people thinking? Sorry. Back to Barry. Barry says, what about those that cannot be vaccinated? Simple. A medical exemption applies. You will see in my other post, my position is all that should be required for a medical exemption for a doctor. In my other post, my position is all that should be required for medical exemption for a doctor in my position, I think. It's for a doctor to sign off that, yes, you qualify for a medical exemption. There should be no need for you to disclose the details of this to your workplace, etc. Yes, this could leave a door open for dodgy doctors to issue medical exemptions, but there's a system of checks to minimize this. I mean, speak for yourself, Barry. That's Australia. In Germany, no, because the law has just been changed. Your employer needs to be informed if you are tested, vaccinated, when you're vaccinated, all of that, or if you were sick, when you were sick, all of that. There is no exemption, as far as I understand, the current Infektionsschutzgesetz for a medical exemption. I mean, you could get a letter from your doctor, probably in Germany, that says, okay, this person has a serious health condition, they can't be vaccinated, but that doesn't help you in real life. If you want to go to a hospital, a restaurant or a rock concert, you can't show the people at the door like a letter from your doctor. I mean, they're not educated in this anyway, so they can barely figure out this yellow passport, right? And most people just use the digital certificate. The digital certificate does not have a bit you can flip, or any way. It has vaccinated and was sick and is now good again. Those are the two states that certificate can have. And then you can have a test certificate. There's no certificate for I can't be vaccinated. If that happens, you can't take public transport in Germany anymore. You can't go to all of these places. So that's why I complain about this, because in Germany, there is no exemption there. There's no way for this to work or to be tracked. Anyway, second point from Basil, herd immunity. I believe we have discussed this before, but I still believe, this is not the best word, it's not a belief, but I know what you mean, Barry, but it's not entirely based on science, because I did not have the time to research. Also see point 3. My conjecture is the more people that get vaccinated, less chance the disease has to spread. You say that, you say, what does it matter if person X decides not to get vaccinated? They only put themselves at risk. I disagree. The people with medical exemptions, also people who are vaccinated, maybe put a higher risk of have a high risk of contracting SARS-CoV-2. We know the vaccine is not 100% effective. Surely I'm better protected if both myself and my colleagues are vaccinated. No. Actually, the current situation in Germany shows very clearly, I'd say scientifically, but it really doesn't, because, so what's happening right now in Germany is we have the highest incident rate we ever had during this pandemic. Incident rate being this positive PCR tests per 100,000 inhabitants, which I've talked about before is a bullshit, unscientific number, because the tests are not standardized really. The people doing the tests, not like it's always it's always like they do it after this protocol in this hospital, right? If this was a scientific study, it would be thrown out the window. There's no negative control, right? So we have this somewhat bullshit number. But if you take that as a given, we right now have a vaccination rate of about 70% in Germany. So we have 30% unvaccinated people. If it was true that vaccinating a large number of people in the population would drop the rate of infection would have dropped off a cliff. It doesn't. So the people who go, oh, vaccination is effective, now go, no. We said this from the beginning, you need like 99%. No, it will never happen. We know, there are good studies now that show that if you're vaccinated, it doesn't, for this particular virus, it doesn't slow the spread. Because you're vaccinated, which means you get the virus, you have it, you're probably spreading it, you are infectious, but the vaccination just means your immune system can react fast enough so you don't really get sick, or you don't get sick seriously. So what this vaccine does is literally just protect yourself. That is the evidence we have right now. There's no other evidence. If there is evidence, please let me know. Private Citizen or Press, contact details are on there. Go in the forum, show me the studies, show me the evidence. But, there is obviously, as far as I can see, no evidence that the vaccine does that. Which I've said from the beginning was going to be the case, because we're talking a highly contagious respiratory virus. My call has been for over a year now that this virus will not go away. I think it will probably change, mutate a little bit, like the flu, probably not as fast, but and then we have a different strain, and then you need a different vaccination. I think you'll be living with different vaccinations for this virus for probably the rest of my lifetime. I think it will turn into some kind of a flu where it just comes around year after year after year. And I mean, there's lots of evidence that this doesn't do anything. If you look at the curve, like all the curves in all the countries, it doesn't matter how many people are vaccinated. It's always the same curve. The curve has always the same shape over the last 2 years, over the seasons. The humps, and then obviously it's the other way around in Australia or in the south, because they have the winter southern hemisphere. But no, I don't think this. Also, he says this under the point herd immunity. That is not really what herd immunity means, right? Herd immunity doesn't mean the disease stops. It just means the majority of the herd, of the population, are immune. But that doesn't mean there's still infections going on. Like, if this kind of thing would work, we have an influenza vaccine for a very long time. If biologists and epidemiologists believed that they could eradicate the flu with this, they would have tried since the 70s. I mean, it works with some diseases that are not as easily communicable, somewhat, like the measles, but it's not like the measles are gone, right? It never, like the plague vaccine was the first vaccine in existence. We haven't eradicated the plague. There was a plague outbreak in 2019 in Mongolia because it lives in animals and whatever. Like, you can't, I don't think you ever eradicated a disease completely with a vaccine. So I don't know where this thinking comes from, and I don't think it's a valid argument. Because the people who say other people need to be vaccinated to protect us all, they would need to prove this, right? I would say citation needed. You need to show me the study that shows me conclusively that this works, and then we can talk about this putting this in the law. Super user says, isn't that a baseline fallacy, Fab? The people who end up in hospital are overwhelmingly the unvaccinated because they can't recover as well. Base rate fallacy. The people who end up in hospital are overwhelmingly the unvaccinated because they can't recover as well. What you can say clearly is that this vaccine works. It works in protecting you. If you take the vaccine, you are less likely, much, 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 much less likely to be seriously sick from this. And you're much, much, much less likely to end up in the fucking ICU in a coma like Yevgeny, who wrote into the show, a few episodes ago. Yes, that's why I'm vaccinated, right? Because I think it's worth that. And even like the combined week of me feeling like really shit, because obviously I had some allergic reaction against the vaccine, is worth it, because I don't know if I have an underlying health condition. I don't know how my body reacts if I get this fucking virus. So yeah, why not get vaccinated? And that helps me. But what I'm saying is, that's what it does. That's what it does. So what we can't show is that it protects the majority of people if more people are vaccinated. We don't have data for that. We can presume that, but we don't have data for that. So I don't want to change the laws based on that, saying that's scientific, because it's not. Because it's scientific to say we don't have data for that, so we do not know. And I think it just doesn't work that way. But I could be wrong as well. I mean, maybe you just need 85% and then suddenly it goes all the way. I mean, we don't know. So what I don't understand is, why are people, I mean, I even understand that people are so afraid of this virus. I understand that. But like, why is your instinct, and I said this on the forum, why is your instinct, if you're afraid of a virus, to go and try to exert power over other people and tell other people what to do? Right? If you think this vaccine's great and it works, do it like me. Take it, be happy, and be happy in the knowledge that if you get this, it's very, very, very unlikely, much, much less unlikely than the already probably, in my age group, unlikely scenario that you could get seriously sick. But you can get seriously sick. We've seen Yevgeny, exactly my age, ended up in an ICU, nearly died, ended up in a coma. This can happen. So get the vaccine, and then you're much more safer. Why do you then get the idea that, oh, now I need to mandate that guy gets vaccinated? Right? That is like, I've been thinking about this a lot lately. And I was thinking, this is like me going around in the street. And so I am 1 meter 84, 6 foot even, and I weigh 80 kilograms. And I got a lot of fitter over the last 2 years. But, that is a good weight. I'm not overweight. Now, if I go down the street and I see somebody who's as tall as me, 6 foot, or 184, and weighs 200 kilograms, right? This is like me going to that guy and saying, are you insane? What the fuck are you doing? You're medically obese. You're increasing your risk of death. Like, COVID is nothing against this. We're talking, you are almost certain to get a heart attack in the next 15 years, or, diabetes, or a fucking stroke, or whatever, like serious cardiovascular disease. It's all like, we have scientific proof that being that heavy at your height, you're obese. This is a problem. What are you doing? We're not doing that. That's none of my business. If somebody wants to eat that much that they fucking keel over at some point with a heart attack, it's their fucking choice. And yes, they're a fucking strain on the medical system. They are sure to end up in a hospital at some point. They are sure to end up probably, getting a bypass and all, but like, that's how it works. I'm okay with paying into the healthcare system so that those people, get a good cardiologist when they need them, and get a good catheter ablation or whatever they need, or a fucking triple bypass, but I could walk down the street and go like, obviously that this is a problem. You're putting a strain on the healthcare system. Why are you eating that much? Why aren't you exercising? What the fuck are you doing? But if that happened, then somebody could go around, why are you riding a motorcycle? You're putting yourself... I put in the forum, I find it amazing that, if like a year ago, right? Or 2 years ago, I would have said, I want to climb Mount Everest, right? A lot of people in my personal... or just people in the public would probably say, good for you. That's a good goal. That's wow. I envy you. I'm actually, I'm supporting you in this. Right? But if you think about it, climbing Mount Everest, there's about, 2 to 3 people a year who die climbing Mount Everest. There's about 800 people climbing Mount Everest every year. And a lot of them are Sherpas. So if you subtract, anyway, at the best, it's like a 1 in 1,000 chance that you die. It's actually very dangerous to climb Mount Everest. Where people are like, good on you. I mean, it's dangerous, but you have a goal in your life. You go do that. And then somebody says, okay, I don't want to get vaccinated. They're like, oh, this is dangerous. Are you insane? You're putting your life at risk. The same people that would have applauded me climbing Mount Everest would have said, if I said I don't want to get vaccinated, they'd be like, oh, why are you putting your life at risk then? Like, even though in my age group, not getting vaccinated, the risk is probably a lot less than, especially me climbing Mount Everest. Well, I mean, I'm not obese or anything, but I'm also not like, I would probably die. I don't know. Mount Everest has a higher probability of death than going to freaking space, and Everest is highly restricted for a few decades for this reason. Yeah. You can pay like all kind of like weird rich people climb Mount Everest. It's just what I'm trying to say here is let people live their fucking lives. Let themselves put it. Yes, maybe if they're not get vaccinated, they're gonna put you at a slightly higher risk. But you're vaccinated. Why do you care? It's not that high a risk. Let people live a little. Give people a little bit of freedom in society. And think about, try to divorce yourself from this fucking panic about this damn fucking virus and think about some other risks and where we're not invading other people's lives and going, the same people that go, it's absolutely unresponsible, and I can't understand how you're not vaccinated, go, well, if somebody's very overweight, that's just their body choice. No, if you weigh 250 kilograms, it's not, it's a kind of a choice, but it's fucking medically insane. And if I go around telling that to people, I get thrown off Twitch chat because I'm discriminating against them. But it's totally okay to discriminate against people who don't want to get vaccinated. That's a fucking life choice. That's the same life choice as eating so many fucking crisps that you weigh 250 kilograms. I'm sorry. Anybody who's listening to this who's weighing 250 kilograms, my point is do whatever you want. I'm not judging you, right? But then don't expect me to judge the unvaccinated people either. Because I don't want to judge. I don't give a damn. I don't even judge people who are religious, even though I personally think they're idiots. But, you got the right to be an idiot in this society. That's why it's a free society. And then Basil's third point was, the science is not certain. The science, that is, science! Shut up already, it's science! While I agree, the science is not certain. While I agree more could be done on the science and more money and better studies done, they all take time. If we just sit around waiting for longevity studies, we are putting ourselves at greater risk. Well, I don't know exactly what Basil was referring to here, but what I said on the forum was basically if you're talking about if vaccines are slow to spread or how we ever slow to spread, I don't think we will ever get any. I don't think we will get any good scientific consensus on this virus ever because we don't have any good data. We have a ton of data, the incidence and whatever, but it's largely not scientifically acquired data. We will have scientific studies from people who work in hospitals who do this in a controlled environment, but as always with something like this, always hard to do negative controls. There's some good studies out of Israel with the vaccination and stuff, but largely, I think this is already a problem. I think this is actually worth maybe as an episode, but I would have to get somebody from my scientific background, from my friends who work in biology or whatever, to come on the show, because I think this is actually this pandemic is a huge problem for science and the way we do science, because we have a lot of data, but I don't think it's very good data. And of course, you can take this shitty data of some PCR test that people are doing or some nose swab test where everybody does it differently, and you have billions of data points and you pour that into a computer model and then you have science. It's just not very good science. And another problem is that you can't do any fucking research on this topic because go to fucking PubMed and put in SARS-CoV-2 and you'll immediately get more studies than you have the rest of your lifetime to read. You just can't do any fucking research. I don't know anybody who's an actual virologist who actually keeps up on the fucking research on this field. I'd love to talk to somebody. And not somebody like Drosten who's fucking on TV all the time. Somebody who's actually doing scientific work in this area. An actual virologist. How do they even keep up? That would be worth an episode. If you know somebody who'd be willing to come on the show who's like a biologist and who wants to talk about the impact of something like this on science, please, Private Citizen Press. I'm not judging, but no, I wasn't judging. This was just putting myself into the shoes. If we start judging people on vaccination, we need to start judging them on these things, right? I literally don't care. If you want to be Drachenlord and you want to weigh 250 kilograms and you want your legs to fall off from fucking diabetes, seriously, more power to you. I don't give a damn. I wouldn't be one who went around criticizing these people. The only reason I talk about this is because the people who usually object to this kind of thing are discriminating other people and think that's okay. That's the only reason why I talk about that. I don't give a fuck. I don't care. Right. Basil's last point is something I think I can just agree on. 4, fund hospitals better. Absolutely agree. However, if I can avoid an ICU stay, I would much prefer that. I'm pretty sure all the best funding would not bring COVID-19 mortality to 0. Of course not. Nothing would bring. People will die from this. I mean, but you can't bring any other mortality to 0. We can't even fucking. I mean, literally talk. If you ever, I can only give people this personal tip. If you have anybody who knows anybody who's a doctor who works in a hospital, get together with them and maybe cook a dinner or whatever, or go drinking in a bar and talk to that person. And it is absolutely incredible what people die of every day that we never think of. People just die, and they die of the stupidest things we can't prevent. I mean, modern medicine is amazing, as you heard in Yevgeny's case, but it can also be absolutely amazing. There's hundreds of thousands of people dying every week where we don't know why. They just die, and you don't really know. And you're why did that artery just burst? We have no fucking clue. It is pretty amazing. It's just people are concentrating on this one aspect. People are never cared about how hospital works. They work. They never cared about how doctors work. They never cared about biology or medical science. And all of a sudden, they have this one thing that everybody talks about, and the press and everybody, all my fucking colleagues that have also never cared about any of this. Suddenly, they care about this, and they don't care about all the other aspects. Right? They don't care about all the people keeling over from cardiovascular disease that we could probably prevent if we had more money for that, for scientific studies in that field. If that was actually a field where pharma companies like Merck and Pfizer and AstraZeneca, if that was where the money was, or the interest from people, then we could actually prevent stuff. It is absolutely amazing and incredible and frustrating if you talk to people who are cardiologists who will tell. I mean, cardiovascular disease is the number one killer in any country ever. Right? Heart attacks, strokes, all this kind of stuff kills the most people by far. COVID isn't even remotely close. Nothing else is close. Car crashes, whatever you can think of, nothing else is close. And in some areas, in the actual treatment of these illnesses, things haven't changed in the last 50 years. There's some areas where there's still the same fucking, beta blockers or whatever they're giving you, where there's been zero R&D scientific advancements in it. I mean, there are areas where, for example, especially where medical devices are concerned, like, when they put a catheter in your vein, so they don't have to do like a huge hole anymore. They just like a little thing on your leg, and then they put this like little tiny thing and put it all the way into your heart, and it has like fucking sensors and cameras and electric sensors, and they can figure all this stuff, and they have a 3D thing. A lot has changed there, but like, right? If anybody had gone and like, okay, what can we actually do with mRNA? If we introduce that into somebody's body, can we like fix these risk factors or whatever? Nobody fucking does that. And there's a ton of people dying of this. And when your relative just dies because they just had a heart attack, everybody's like, well, that's just a heart attack. You can't prevent that. Right? And with this virus, like, oh, if you just had vaccines and everybody was vaccinated, then we'd all be... No. Sometimes people there also just die and you can't prevent that. I mean, I understand that you don't want to end up in an ICU, Bethel will. I don't want to either. But you gotta understand that no matter how much you pressure other people into getting vaccinated, at the end of the day, if you get this virus, which is very likely that you get it at some point because it's very contagious and it's fucking everywhere, you will get it, and then it's down to your body, and it's down to any health conditions you might not know about, and it's down to some factors we don't understand. It's down to like how your immune system, like if we did actually some fucking research into the immunology, I mean, we don't know fucking anything. If you read into this stuff, it's unbelievable how little they know about how the immune system works, how even like these vaccines work in the long term on the immune system, right? The question if like, okay, so you get this, it produces like you put this into your body, it produces like the spike protein, and your body produces antibodies, right? What happens then? How long do they stay in your blood? How long do they stay in your blood for different people, right? Of different phenotypes, or as you would say, racial backgrounds. What happens then? There's more levels to the immune system. There's memory cells. Does the immunity end if you don't have any antibodies in your blood anymore? Like I just recently talked to somebody, we don't even fucking know, like these antibody tests, right? If you do a titer and somebody gets the vaccine and you see how many antibodies they have in their blood. What they're testing is raw number of antibodies, but they don't know if these are actually the antibodies that work. Because apparently, because these proteins are so complex, there are like lots of antibodies, and some of them that don't train your immune system, or that they don't do the same thing in the immune system than others. And we can't fucking tell them apart. So the only thing we can do is like a number of antibodies. And this is why you have people who got vaccinated who had antibodies who then get really sick. And we're like, why didn't their immune system react? They had the vaccine produced a reaction in the immune system. We saw the antibodies. Why are they still getting sick? Like, we don't know any of this shit. It's amazing. When you listen to my fellow journalists in the press, in the mainstream press, they was like, oh yeah, this is science, and it works, and you should get vaccinated. Because they don't understand all this shit. Because immunology is like only the knowledge I have is only from high school, and that's like, I don't know, probably 3 decades out of date. And sometimes I realize that I know more than the fucking people who write about this in the fucking newspaper. Anyway. Thanks for the feedback. I appreciate it. I can only say please go to the forum and discuss with us there. Go to privatecitizen.press. There's a link in there, or go directly to forum.fab.industries. I appreciate these discussions, and I love that people write in stuff, and I love the live discussion on Twitch. That's why I love to be on Twitch. Captain Eckert chiming in. Don't presume that you agree with me. I don't fucking agree with you, you fuck. No, but like, I really, really cool. Also, you took my my comments in the forum. Like, I was like really careful. I'm like, look, I'm not trying. I'm just gonna be brutally honest. I'm not gonna try to attack you personally. He's like, why would I think that? I'm like, yes. This is the kind of person I want to listen to my show. You're cool. And we can disagree. I think this is cool. So please, if you disagree with me, go to the forum or Private Citizen Press. Go to the contact link there, and there are many ways to contact me. You can also contact me privately. whistleblower contact form and all of that. And with that, I have to talk about the people who support this show as well. And I need to find the button for the music, and here it is. And I just missed in chat before when you're talking about the spread and the vaccination. Super, you said, in practice, the current spread is because people are careless again when outside. Yeah, but you're presuming that masks and whatever stop the spread. And they clearly don't as well. Because, dude, we've had this fucking virus spreading everywhere for a year and a half. And I've been wearing a fucking mask every time I'm in a place with people for about a year or longer. I can't even remember anymore. It clearly doesn't completely stop the spread, which I said from the very beginning. You can't fucking stop the spread of a respiratory virus. Otherwise, they wouldn't exist. They're a life form, and it's debatable whether a virus is a life form. That's an interesting debate to have for another day. That exists because they keep spreading. They would, like a virus, not all viruses, there's some that can encapsulate into this kind of spore, and then they live in the ground. What's the fucking thing when you cut yourself? Anyway, bacteria can do that. Anyway, but generally, like these things, this virus doesn't survive if it's outside the body. So they have to be somewhere. That's how they survive. If you could stop the spread, then we get rid of these things. It's not about people being careless. It's about humans are a social animal. You can't do this. You can't stop it. The only way to stop us is if you live in segregated villages and you just close the village down, you don't let anybody out. Like they did for Ebola. And then because that kills people really fast, if you keep that up for like 2 weeks, everybody's fucking dead. And then you're rid of the virus until somebody starts fucking a chimpanzee again and gets it again. But, you can do that with something like this. With a respiratory virus, like the flu, this virus, MERS, SARS, rhinoviruses, fucking other coronaviruses, they're fucking everywhere for millions of years because that's what they do. And they do that very well. And Angela Merkel going, you have to be all very careful and you have to wear the mask and then the virus goes away, doesn't do it. Because probably these things are evolutionary superior to us, which is why they're fucking everywhere. Anyway, why did I go back into that? I'm an idiot. What I wanted to say is, if you're supporting this crap, me yelling at you for like 2 hours, I salute you. You are a good person. If you're doing that, you really are a good person because it's not easy. And it's not easy to do this show. It takes quite a lot out of me, but I think it's harder to listen to it. So you're the real star here, and especially the people who are helping out. I'm not going to go into this. I ranted for long enough. This is the value for value model. If you see value, give value back. Private-citizen.press. Show notes explain. Have a link to the value for value model, what it is. You can become a patron, which means you subscribe and then you keep the show going, which literally keeps the show going. I actually had somebody on the forum again being worried that I would stop the show. And I've done that in the past. I've stopped podcasts. But in the past, the podcast didn't have a Patreon. And I don't know, how many people? I don't want to lie, so I'm going to look it up. Patreon.com. I have 41 people supporting the show right now. And with a monthly, they're paying money for me to do this show. varying amounts of money, but 41 people. And that is the best insurance for me to keep this show going. Because as long as there's people there who are willing to pay money every month for me to do the show, I feel obliged to do the show. So, if we had that with Linux Outlaws, and there'd been 41 people wanted me to keep Linux Outlaws going, I would probably have kept it going. Even though I thought it was the better decision to not do that. But, I'm not promising that I will do the show indefinitely. Let's get this right. But, the chance is higher as long as people support it. So if you want to keep it going, there's your chance. Also, I'm not pressuring you. That's not how value for value works. Same as I wasn't judging the fucking fat people. I'm also not judging. I'm not saying you need to give me money to keep the show going. But it is what it is. That's how the world works. It's a surveillance capitalism without the surveillance. It's just capitalism. If you don't want to do Patreon, also producers at fab.industries is an email address you can PayPal money to. That works as well. And with that, I would like to thank the crazy people who are doing this, who brought this show to you. So thanks to Georges, Steve Hose, Butterbeans, Johnson M. Heathy, Michael Mullen Jensen, Dave, Michael Small, One Eye 11G, Jaroslav Lichtblau, Jackie Plage, Philipp Klostermann, IKN, Vlad, Rodane the Insane, Bennett Piata, Kai Sears, Tobias, Fadi Mansour, Joe Poser, Dirk Didi, Mode 7, Sandman616, David Potter, Rizal, Mika, Avis, Martin, Mr. Amish, Dave Amrish, Cam, Ricky M, Barry Williams, Jonathan, Captain Eckhead, RJ Tracy, Rick Bragg, D, Robert Forster, Superuser, Astral C, and No Reply. And with that, I have to say, by the way, I don't say this often enough, I think, if you want to support me on Patreon, but you don't want your name listed, you just need to write me. I mean, you can write me on Patreon. I had people who wanted to change the name I credit them with. I do that. I just need to know. And if you don't want to be credited and you still want to give me money, I'm all right with that. Although I think you can see, at least you can, no, I don't think other people can see that. Other people can see how many people support me and how much money they give me each month. I wanted to have that transparent because I think that's only fair. But I don't think they can specifically see. Otherwise, just make a Patreon account with a name like Johnny Nobody 154 or whatever. But yeah, I just want to point that out. I also need to thank my Twitch subscribers. As you've realized, I'm streaming this live on Twitch as I'm doing this. So thanks to the people who've subscribed there, which also gives me money, helps keep the show going. Mike the Dane, JonathanMH.com, Sandman616 or _com on Twitch, Sandman616, JJ Guevara, Bacon the Pork, Mode 7 is unavailable, Indie Gamiacs, El Terrestris Jim, and Redeemer F. A lot of these people are also on the forum. They are supporting me more than once here, and thanks for that. I also have to thank Bytemark at bytemark.co.uk. They are a British cloud hosting company, and they provide the servers that the audio files are on. So if they cancel me off Twitch or off YouTube...
Yeah, it's a great time to be a podcaster.
And it's a great time to get a server from Bytemark, is all I can say. Love those guys. Anyway, also credit where credit's due. The podcast theme music is called Acoustic Roots by Raoul Kabazali. And with that, I'm going to leave. And I'm probably going to be back next week. I'm guessing I will do the episode unless something huge happens about the Traffic Light Coalition and the update on how that's gone in Germany and some interesting thing. One thing we already know now is that they're going to legalize marijuana, and I'm all for that. So we'll be locked in. We'll have to wear masks all the time, but at least we can smoke a joint while we do it. Or in my case, probably edibles, because I don't know, smoking the stuff doesn't work for me. Whereas edibles, when I tried this completely legally in the great city of Los Angeles, I went to the fucking moon. With that, I would like to play Frank Sinatra, but I can't because of copyright reasons. I do have a license from Epidemic Sound, though, and so we're going to have some metal. As the Drachenlord would say, metal, Leute. See you next week. Aim to misbehave. Don't force people into getting vaccinated, please. And eat as much as you want. And meddle off. This is In the Arms of Anger by Under Earth. That is a good song, I think. I really like that. There's a lot of growling metal on Epidemic Sound, which, if you know me, I'm not a fan of. But that was really good. Thanks for watching, everybody. I appreciate it a lot. I will now go and finish this podcast, and then I will write a lot and probably cry. A bisschen Augenschwitzen. Because, I'm trying to do this again. This is NaNoWriMo Winners Church 2011, 10 years ago. I want to duplicate that smashing success with a book I then can actually use. Anyway, thanks for watching. I'm going to hand, as you probably have seen, I will hand you on to Aqua FPS now, who's playing Hunt Showdown. And he has a mustache that I support wholeheartedly. He's a very wholesome streamer, pretty cool. If you like shooters, watching people play shooters, then Aqua is definitely up there. Good guy to watch. So I'm going to hand you over, and I'm going to see you probably on Saturday. I'll probably be streaming pretty much all weekend, crying in front of my keyboard, trying to finish this fucking NaNoWriMo goal. Anyway, thanks for watching. See you soon. And yeah. Say hello to Aqua for me. Goodbye.